Hey, welcome to Real Life. Great to see everybody. Really glad you're here. I want to welcome everybody in the room, those of you enjoying this outside, those of you watching online, and to our Lancaster campus. Can we just applaud and welcome them joining us over in Lancaster? Really glad to have you guys with us as well as Simi Valley and Canyon Country. Thrilled that you guys are joining us. Listen, there's something coming up at the end of this year, December 26th to be exact. We are finally taking another trip back to Israel. And we have tried this several times since our last trip, and then COVID kept shutting us down, but we are going. And so we're heading out December 26th. I would love for you to go with us. It is a trip of a lifetime. For many people, they consider it on their bucket list. It never disappoints. I've been there several times. I always get something fresh out of it. You will never read the Bible the same again. In fact, I've known people that have gone over there with all of their skepticism and doubts and questions and come back in a renewed state of faith because of what they've seen where these things happened. I mean, it kind of changes your life when you stand and look into the empty tomb. It is a big, big deal. And you can sign up right now at rlc.is/Israel and join us to head over there December 26th through January 4th. Perfect time right there in that in-between time. And yes, we'll keep track of all the bowl games going on while we're over there. They'll be on at like 3 a.m., but that's okay. You can come to my room. We'll watch it together. But it's going to be a wonderful time. Make sure that you sign up for that, and you can get on a kind of a payment plan to pay up in order to get there, and so it's not all one huge chunk, and bring your family. It's going to be awesome. So that's coming up. And I don't know how many of you have been following March Madness. Some of you don't care. Some of you have no clue what that means. Some of you think it's a rash. But it really is a pretty awesome thing where college basketball teams compete, and there's 68, then go down to 64, 32, and 16, and UCLA is still in it, which is pretty awesome. But here's the really cool thing. Every now and then, some story comes out of it that nobody expected, but it kind of makes the news, and it kind of goes viral. And one of those stories happened recently, and this was in the first round game. We're going to go ahead and roll the tape here.
That's how high up it is.
As you can see what's going on here, the basketball is stuck on top of the goal.
We're getting a chair
and they don't know how to get it down. They got a court filled with 7-footers, and nobody can reach the basketball. And so we're trying to figure out what to do here, and I'll just kind of narrate as we go.
Now we're going to put
this tall fella here is thinking, well, I can't reach it. Can't even jump that high. What about you? No, not me either.
Oh, no, it's
okay, let's get a ref with a broom.
That's
okay.
not going to work.
Well, that's a mop, I guess.
So he's got to go on
he's going to hold the chair. Maybe put the tall guy in the chair. I don't know. Anyway, so he can't reach it either. So what are we going to do? The game cannot go on.
Issues here in Portland.
And so now suddenly somebody from Indiana has a bright idea. People are stunned. There's weeping in the stands. Here we go. Bring the cheerleader over. Here she comes. The crowd is cheering. Everybody's going nuts. And she gets the basketball. This guy's as happy as he's been all day. It's just great. All right, I love that video because it shows sometimes you got to think way outside the box, okay? It seems like it would make sense for someone just to jump up and tap it down. Can't reach it. Maybe a stick, not going to work. I know. Let's go get a cheerleader, put them on shoulders, walk over, and get the basketball. You got to think way outside the box. Now, why do I tell you that? For a couple reasons. First of all, after the last 2 years and the amount of darkness that our world has gone through, from global pandemic to the political landscape to the issues with race and race reconciliations, how polarized everybody has been, how people have lost friends and family members, not just because of COVID, but because of opinions about COVID. Not to mention all of the atrocities we've seen in Afghanistan and now Ukraine. I mean, these are dark times like most of us have never seen before. And it seems to me that our world is looking outside the box because everything else has failed them. Government failed them. Politics failed them. Science failed them. Religion has seemed to fail them. Authority seemed to fail them. Everything seemed to fall apart, and they're looking for something else. And maybe that's where you are. Maybe you're going through some dark times right now. Maybe it's relational. You're going through a divorce. Maybe you're losing kids in the kind of the empty nest syndrome. Maybe you've lost a loved one to some kind of a disease or an accident. Maybe it's a breakup that you've been through. And for many of us, the darkness that we feel is economic. We just feel like the pressure is caving in on us right now, and we don't know what to do next. And we're beginning to look outside the box. For some of us, it's more of a spiritual darkness. And that might not be a term that you would have used to describe it, but what else could it be when your life is so full of stuff, but your heart is so empty? And 2,000 years ago, people felt that same way, but then Jesus was born, and Jesus grows up to say these words. He says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness." In other words, all of the things that you've tried to use in the past to work, to make your life feel like it worked, they just haven't done it. And here comes Jesus, outside of the box, saying, "I'm the light of the world." And for many of us, we have experienced that light, and we've chosen to follow that light. And I'm telling you, when you begin to do this, it is stunning. In fact, it kind of is a little bit like, those dimmer switches that we have in some of our rooms. Maybe you've got that in the dining room so you can kind of, create a mood or whatever. And when you turn that on, you slowly raise it up, it gets a little brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. And that's what it's kind of like to follow Jesus. You decide to start following him, and you take one step towards him, it gets a little bit brighter. And another step, it gets a little bit brighter, and it gets brighter. And the more steps you take in his direction, the clearer things get, because you're experiencing the light like you've never known before. And maybe for some of you, you've never thought that way. You've never thought outside the box, but you're looking around for something. Can I just tell you, Jesus is the light of the world. And I want to invite you to take that step. And on Easter, we're going to be doing baptisms again. And I'd love for you to be a part of that. But I want to take a few moments and talk to those of you who have experienced that light. You've decided to give your lives to Jesus. You've been following Jesus. You've been baptized. And you know what it's like to experience the light of Jesus, but maybe you've forgotten that Jesus doesn't want us just to experience his light. He wants us to be a light in the darkness. In fact, take a look at what Jesus says here as recorded by Matthew. And if we come to a bold word, we're going to say that out loud. Everybody inside, outside, and those watching online, here we go. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Now, the guy who wrote that is a guy that would have heard those words from Jesus, and he would have been kind of letting them sink into his life. And his name was Matthew. In fact, the name that he was probably known by was the Hebrew word for Matthew, which was Levi. And he just began to think about, what does it mean to be a light? And so today we're going to kind of reimagine what happened in Matthew's life when he went from just experiencing the light of Jesus to being a light for Jesus. And he had to think outside the box just a little bit. Now, as we say around here all the time, the Bible is not just one book. The Bible is basically a library of books. It's about 66 books written over 1,600 years, 40 different authors, several different continents. And this one collection of books, known as the Gospels, the truth about Jesus, the good news, written by 4 different people, and 2 of which were eyewitnesses. The other 2 interviewed eyewitnesses. But this one in particular is Matthew, a.k.a. Levi. And he was a follower, or what we call a disciple of Jesus. But he didn't start out that way. In fact, Matthew was a tax collector. And tax collectors back then were, we think about that as maybe they were like the IRS. Well, they're a little bit worse than that. Sorry if you work for the IRS. But back then, a tax collector, They were somebody who was legally allowed to rob you because Rome wanted their cut, but then they said you can hike it up to whatever you want it to be, and then you can keep the rest. And some of you might right now be thinking about gas prices. I don't know. That's between you and the Lord. You can pray about it. But anyway, these people would hike up the price and keep the rest for them. And so because of that, nobody liked the tax collectors. But the tax collectors liked their job because they made a lot of money. And nobody liked them, but they liked each other. They hung out together, and they were okay. But something must have happened in Matthew's life, because at some point he had realized that even though he was outwardly successful, his life must have left him unfulfilled. I mean, he was able to afford all the little gadgets and toys and shop at Sharper Image and get all those kind of neat things and go on the vacations and have multiple homes, but something was missing. It's kind of like he'd worked his whole life to climb this ladder of success only to realize it was leaned up against the wrong wall. And he was just so focused on everything else and had everything that he could want, and he just had nothing at all. And somehow Jesus comes around. And he'd probably been hearing Jesus talk in the marketplace and around other people, and certainly Jesus caused a stir when he was around. So Matthew was probably following around and listening to him. And one day, out of the blue, Jesus looks at Matthew and he says, "Hey, why don't you follow me?" And for some reason, the light goes on for Matthew. And he decides, why not? And he decides to start following Jesus. And a few days later, you fast forward just a little bit, Matthew is having a party with all of his old friends and his new friends. His old friends being the tax collectors, his new friends being Jesus and his disciples. And I got to just wonder, how did it come to that? How did Matthew get to the point where he was able to throw this party, or even have the idea to throw this party, to think so far out of the box that he didn't just start going to temple with Jesus, he throws a Christian cocktail party and has Jesus and his disciples there to meet all of his tax collector friends. Well, let's think about this for just a second. Could it be that Matthew went to work one last day just to pick up stuff from his desk? And he had said yes to Jesus the day before, and he didn't know where this was going to take him, but he knew his life had changed already. And so he goes back to the office with his little cardboard box just to pick up, his pencils and pictures and, coffee mug that says world's best thief or something like that, Collects all those things, and he's beginning to kind of say goodbye to some of his buddies, and he's walking off, and he's realizing that he may not see these guys again. And he wanders, kind of around the room a little bit and looks at all the cubicles of all the tax collectors he used to work with and think, man, these were my buddies. These were the guys that we'd go out to the bar with afterwards, or we'd have the office pools on the chariot races that was going on, or we would hang out on the weekends, and I'm just walking away from all of them. I think at some point Matthew had to think, why do I just get to follow Jesus? These guys need Jesus too. I mean, I've experienced light in my darkness, but it's also my responsibility to share that light. And he thinks, what do I do? Do I invite them to temple? They're not going to go. Do I wear a real bright Christian t-shirt that says, his pain, your gain? Well, the pain hasn't even happened yet. I mean, what am I supposed to do, right? WWJD bracelet? But then he thinks, I don't know. I got to come up with something. I got to think outside the box. And I got to believe he's sitting in his recliner at night thinking about his next day. He's going to take off with Jesus and the disciples and thinks, well, I got to do something. Maybe I know what I can do. I've always been great at hosting parties. I'm just a great party thrower. People love it. We have a great time. And I got the new, Jerusalem Jock Jams everybody's going to love. This will be just great. So he thinks, I tell you what, I'm going to throw a party, and I'm going to invite all my buddies from the office, and I'm going to invite my new friends, Jesus and the disciples. Apparently, he checks the idea out with Jesus. Jesus says, absolutely. Matthew rolls into Costco, and he gets all the meatballs, and the little weenies, and, everything that he needs, little pastries, little cream puffs. And he's ready. He puts a list together of his friends and gets the disciples and Jesus there. And the party is ready to start. Raises the question, if this were you, who would you invite? The party starts, and Jesus is there, and the disciples are there, and all the tax collector buddies are there, and it's not even awkward. The music's loud, and everybody's hanging out and eating popcorn and hot wings, and Matthew's looking around thinking, isn't this great? Jesus is over there telling stories, and all my friends are on the edge of their seat just listening. And there's James and John over there, and they're trying to figure out if they can both lift a couch full of people together. I mean, that looks fun. And there's Peter. I'm sure he said something that he's put his foot clean in his mouth, but oh well, that's just the way it is. And he looks around and he just sees this group of people together just mingling and conversing and talking, and it's just great. But then they show up. They would be the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees. And the Pharisees show up to figure out what's all the racket going on over here. And they're the ones, and we've talked about them before, that are supposed to be the most godly and holy people. And what Jesus is doing, hanging out with these people, is not godly or holy in their book. And you can just see them all worked up in a lather, and their tassels are flying, and they're upset. They're knocking on the door. What's going on in here? Turn it down. Because they can't figure out what it means to look outside the box a little bit. They can't figure out what it means to be a light. They only want to experience the light from God. And they certainly haven't figured out that Jesus is that light. And so we catch this, and actually Luke records this for us. Matthew and all of his buddies are in there, and Luke tells us exactly what the Pharisees say, and that is, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? In other words, what are you thinking, eating and drinking with immoral and profane, sinful, dark, greedy, heartless, faithless, irreligious people? And you can almost sense the whole room has gone quiet. The needle on the record player has screeched all the way across it, and everybody stopped and is looking, because here are the godly people judging us all. But Jesus isn't fazed. And he says this, fellas, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Pharisees don't know what to do with that. I can just picture them grabbing their robes and running out of there, a little bit of embarrassment and anger, trying to figure out what to do with him. And I imagine that slowly over the course of the next few moments, people began getting their things and heading out. And Jesus and the disciples start cleaning things up and get the trash bags out and filling them up, recycling, of course. And then when it's just Jesus and Matthew, I got a feeling that Jesus probably just put his arm around Matthew and told him two things. First of all, Matthew, I love your heart. I mean, some people have tried to follow me, and they don't invite anybody. Some people have left everything to follow me and never told their families who I am. But you threw a party. You thought way outside the box. So you could not just experience the light, but you could be a light. Matthew, I love your heart. But I think he'd also say this to him, I love your courage. I mean, throwing a party like this, it was a long shot. It was risky. It'd never been done before. I'm sure you were nervous. I'm sure you were afraid nobody would show up or nobody would talk to each other or the room would be divided in two. But you did what few people are willing to do, and you went out on a limb for other people. And I love that risk you took. I love the courage that it took for you to do that. So Matthew, never forget. I love your heart and I love your courage. You know, this thinking outside the box kind of thing, that doesn't just apply in a basketball game, but it applies in how we're to be a light to other people. Last week we talked about how God's love and mercy is not just for some, not just for a few, and certainly not for perfect, because none of us are. It is for everyone. And if everyone is going to experience it, it means we have to think outside the box a little bit to reach people who've never been reached in ways that we're not currently trying. I remember when my wife and I moved here to California, we just decided we want to be people that do that. We didn't do that where we were before. And so we just decided, as introverted as we are, we're going to make an effort to randomly get together with people we don't even know. People that are far from God, don't go to church at all, but we live near them. And so randomly we would throw parties, and sometimes one person would show up. Sometimes several would show up. Then we got the great idea that we would throw a barbecue get-together in the front lawn with our life group, our community group, invite them. So when people started to look out the window and see if it was safe to go, they think, well, there's critical mass. I guess I might show up. And they started coming out, and we started building friendships. Over the past 15 years, I've just seen so many little parties here and there, and we've just built friendships we would have never had. And we've seen some of those friends come to faith. We've had some of those friends get baptized. I've done weddings for some of those friends. I've done a funeral for one of those friends. And yeah, there are moments it's highly uncomfortable because, like I said, we're both introverts. But it's always worth it. A few months ago, we had a dinner party, and some families came over from our neighborhood, and one family had some little kids, and so our youngest daughter, Sydney, said, I'll take the kids, we'll go out back. And so I just wanted to create a fun environment, you know, so I'm not going to play like worship tunes or whatever, and everybody be freaked out like, what's happening here? So I just put on, you know, like on Pandora, a party playlist or whatever, and so it's playing, and I can't hear it. I don't know what's being sung, you know, and Sydney, our daughter, comes in and goes, hey, Dad, you might want to change the playlist. I said, oh, why is that? Well, they're saying some words. I'm getting questions from the 7-year-old as to what those words mean. I said, oh, well, let's let them learn at the pastor's house. That's great. Wonderful. So we made a little alteration there, and it doesn't always work out perfectly, but I think in those moments, I just feel the smile of God. I love your heart. I love your courage. You thought outside the box. Friends, that's always been our approach here at Real Life. Because we know that many of you, just like Matthew, you have buddies that you feel like you've left behind. You didn't know if you were supposed to clean out your contact list or throw away your Rolodex the moment you came to Christ, but Jesus would say, no, now you get to go and be the light to them. And that's one of the reasons we do church the way we do around here. That's one of the reasons we talk about the subject matters that we do, and we have lights and music and have services outdoors and online and cup holders on seats and dress casual, just because we want to create a great party for you to bring a friend to. Now, I'll be honest with you. It hurts my feelings when other people that don't go to this church make fun of us because we're not deep enough, or it's not a seminary class when you roll in here, or pastor's not as spiritual as theirs. And you know what? That's between them and the Lord and me and my therapist. But you know what? I'm okay with that, because we're going to keep throwing parties every single weekend for you to bring your friend who's never been to church before so they could experience Jesus in a brand new way. So here's what I want to ask you to do. I want you to think outside the box. And I want you to begin thinking about those 4 people, and we talked about this last week. Start thinking of 4 people that you know that don't go to church anywhere, and you want to connect them to Jesus. Much like Matthew's story, you want to throw a party or bring them to a party where they'll get to know Jesus. And I want to give you 2 things to do to be for everyone, and specifically for your 4. The first one is, I want you to pray specifically. Now, I know that we all pray blanket prayers for people in our life. God, help all of the people in the world come to know you. Amen. Let's eat. Okay, now that is not all that specific, but I want you to think about these 4 people in your life and begin praying for them on a daily basis. Many of us over the past few weeks have been fasting from one thing in order to, when we think about that thing, pray for people specifically. And I want to give you a little exercise here that might help you think about who those people are. So everybody put your hand up just like this. Your 5 fingers out here, 4 fingers and a thumb, okay? I want this, just go ahead and grab a hold of your thumb here. The thumb represents you, okay? That's who you are. And then I want you to think about 4 other people that don't know Jesus. We'll start here with this first finger. It's the closest one to you. Who is somebody close to you that does not know Jesus, does not go to church, does not care about church? Think about that for just a second. That could be one of your names. The second finger. Don't put the other fingers down, okay? We're just going to hold on to this one, and let's go there. This is the person that you think is furthest from God that you despise. Okay? It's the bad finger, all right? And I want you to think about that. Let's just deal with it. It's the person that you want nothing to do with, you don't like, you don't want to be around, but you know what? They need Jesus. Okay? Here's the next one. This is your weakest finger. I want you to think of somebody right now in their life that they're weak. They're struggling right now, emotionally, financially, spiritually, relationally. Maybe that's a name for you. And then this last one. This is somebody, your shortest finger, somebody who, you know what, they've just made their share of mistakes and you feel like they're not on top of the world's on top of them. And they feel like they don't measure up. That can be your 4 names. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to the Real Life Church app and I want you to put those names in. Even if it's just the first name, no, we're not going to show up at their door tomorrow and say, well, somebody's praying for you. Let's guess who it might be. I want you to begin praying for them specifically, and we're going to join you in that. And our prayer team and our staff, we're going to be praying with you for those 4 people. You got to think outside the box. This is what we're doing. We're going to get specific and pray for those people. But then we're going to do one more thing today. We're going to kind of make a monument to that name, so to speak. And at all of our campuses, we're going to do this. And online, there are specific instructions for you to do this that your campus pastor, David Park, is going to tell you about here in just a minute. But if you're in one of our rooms right now, you are going to have a chance here in a second to walk down front and get a light bulb. And on that light bulb, you're going to write one of those names. First name is fine. And then we're going to get 4 light bulbs, write all 4 of those names, and then you're going to go out to the lobby at the campus that you're at, and there is a huge wall there that spells out the word everyone. As in one of our mottos around here, this is for everyone. And then you're going to take that light bulb and you're going to prayerfully put it into that wall and watch that light come on. And that wall's going to be up there the remainder of the year as we continue to pray for those things, throw parties for those names, and continue to invite those people. Friends, the stakes are high. Eternity is on the line. So pray boldly. Here's the last thing. I want to ask you to invite boldly. Just as Matthew had to get up the courage to go to those buddies and invite them to a party that would possibly change their lives, I want you to be bold enough to invite someone to our Easter service. This service is going to be a clear presentation of what Jesus is, what he did, and what he can do for somebody. You're not going to want to come alone. Even if your friend doesn't live around here, they can watch online. After all, that's how about 90% of us got here in the first place, somebody invited us. So we're going to do two things. We're going to pray specifically. We're going to put those names there in the app. We're going to put names on light bulbs. But then we're also going to invite boldly. And Easter is such a great opportunity to do that. Maybe they're weirded out by crowds and you think, oh, it'll be too busy and they're still nervous about COVID. That's all right. They can watch online. Or invite them to the series following Easter. We're going to do a whole series on mental health and talk about what it means to get our minds really put together in a way that God changes the way that we think. It's going to be so helpful for all of us. So pray specifically, invite boldly. A couple summers ago, we were visiting family in Missouri. And while you're there, you got nothing to do, so you go over to the biggest city or most exciting city in Missouri, and that would be Branson, Missouri. Oh man, it is Nashville of Branson, and of Missouri, that is. And so we love going over to Branson, and we're trying to find something to do, and we're kind of out of options. It's hot outside, it's humid, let's go somewhere we can go indoors. And so I had the bright idea, let's go to the Titanic Museum. Nothing says the Titanic like Branson, Missouri, but we went there. And we went in and we start walking around. And it was really pretty fascinating. All kinds of artifacts from the Titanic and different pieces of information. And it was really cool. And we get to this one space, and there's all these different plaques, 20 different plaques that represented the 20 lifeboats that were on the Titanic. And as I walked through, they listed all the names of the people that were on the Titanic. And I noticed that some were filled up, and some only had a few people on them. In fact, I looked later and I discovered that they estimate that half of the lifeboats weren't even filled. I don't want that to be our story, where we find life, where we find light, but we don't let anybody else share it. Let's be the kind of people that offer a hand to somebody, that not just experience the light of Jesus, but we are the light of Jesus. Let's be the people that pray specifically and invite boldly. Let me pray for you. God, we're so grateful that Matthew shared his story of his faith journey with Jesus, but then how he invited others into that journey. God, we want to be so bold. We want to be so specific. So who are those 4 people in our lives right now that we could begin praying for specifically, and we could have the courage to invite them boldly? God, over these next few moments, will you just do a work on our heart for the people who aren't here yet? And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.